Hi everyone, this is Culture Mapping and your hosts, Konstantin, that's obviously me, and Anastasia.
Hi, in this podcast inspired by the book Culture Map, we are interviewing people from various backgrounds to learn more about their culture and their life, and their businesses.
Talking about businesses, Anastasia and I were both entrepreneurs. I am a co-founder of content production company Storm, and Anastasia is a co-founder of Movingo, relocation platform. And Culture Mapping is our own way to reflect on how to live a global life in such a fragmented world. Hey, it's Gaith speaking, so I got back to Dubai, so the recording is now in a nice way. I'm in the studio, and I just want to introduce you to the bonus episode that Anastasia recorded during summer. So we just wanted to treat you to some culture mapping while we were working on a second season. So yeah, we will be back soon. A quick reminder about the sponsor of the first season. It's Flowwow. It's a marketplace of cool gifts and flowers. Download the app through the link in the description and enter this amazing world of cool gifts and cool features. They have a calendar where you can put all the important dates, and before actually sending the gift or the bouquet, they're sending the photo to you. And one of the most important parts for me especially is that you can share the contact details of the recipient. Marketplace would contact them directly, so you don't have to monitor everything by yourself. And remember about the promo code. It's CULTURE, CULTURE. You will get a 15% discount of all the purchases you've made. It will work till the end of the year. And to make a long story short, we're tuning in to the bonus episode.
Hi, Gaith. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Is it?
It was a good try. So the actual pronunciation in Arabic is Gaith. But I guess since we're talking about culture, this has been my name has always been something that I've struggled with when it came to especially English speaking people trying to pronounce it. So yeah, I'm used to Gaith, and then all the other ranges in between. Yeah.
I have a very funny story about my name as we started to talk about this. So it's Anastasia, which is kind of more international version. In Russian, it is Anastasia. And just a couple of weeks ago, I had a call with a client and he's like, "What is your name? I can't read it, but it is a medicine, right?" I'm like, I was never called the medicine again, but okay, also a good try. I think he meant Anastasia or whatever. Anyway.
Oh, so, that's really funny.
Yeah, it is. Well, not really funny for me, but fine. So please, usually our first question is the following. Please just introduce yourself, how you usually do. Tell us what's your name, where are you from, and what are you doing?
So hi, I'm Gaith Abdulla. I am a Gulf Studies specialist, researcher interested in contemporary Gulf politics and its intersection with contemporary art. And I am also the co-founder of Engage 101, which is an art collecting and research platform, and co-founder of Bayt Al Mamzar, which is an independent art space in Dubai.
That's beautiful. And you've been born in Dubai?
Yes. So I was born in Dubai, but raised in the US.
How come?
So my parents were studying there, both. They met, actually, I think, they're Washington, D.C. And my brother and I, spent the early years of our life in Washington, D.C.
Why didn't you all stay there as a family? Why did you decide to come back to the UAE?
Oh, I think it's because the idea was always they were going to study. And then, so my mom is actually Lebanese and my dad is Emirati. And so the idea was that they would move back. It wasn't a question, I think. Something I never thought about.
Yeah, but that's interesting because we talk to different people and they all have, let's say, this very sometimes chaotic movements from country to country, and the motivation is usually different. That's why I'm interested to know why did they decide? But we need to ask them probably.
I can theorize. So at the time and still today, there's less so today, but the UAE was always a place which was it's very affluent. So I think just from the work opportunities and salary expectations or stuff, it was a no-brainer that my dad would move back, and he was teaching at UAE university at the time and throughout his career. So I think it was basically that it was a no-brainer that he was going to study in the US and then come back and teach in the UAE.
Okay, well, that makes perfect sense. Because it's still your home country, and expats from all over the world, they would just come there to live because it's their dream, and this is your place to come back to. So I can understand. And what about you? Where did you study? Like, did you study in the UAE or you went elsewhere? Did you live anywhere else?
Yeah. So I actually studied in the UK, in London, at a university called SOAS, which is School of Oriental and African Studies.
And what made you interested in this field?
It's actually really funny. It was the logo of the university.
Okay.
Yeah. This is stuff I've like totally forgotten. So, when you're like in high school, they have these like university fairs and stuff where you go to and you discover universities and stuff. So there was one for UK universities. I was pretty sure I wanted to go to the UK because it was like closer than the US and for other reasons. So like I knew I wanted to go to the UK, but in high school I was obsessed with LSE, London School of Economics. And so I really wanted to go there. Or actually like INSEAD was another one. But I don't know if they do bachelors or anything, but like I was more into like the business schools. And anyway, so yeah, I go to this university fair and we're discovering all these universities. And then I see the Erz tree, which is the cedar of Lebanon. Do you know the one that's on the Lebanese flag?
Yeah.
Like, oh, cool. What? So I told you my mom was Lebanese. Like, why is there the cedar tree? What the hell is this? So I go up to it and it says like, it had the tree and then underneath it said SOAS. And I'm like, what is this? What is SOAS? They're like, yeah, so we're a university and we specialize in Asia and Africa and the Middle East. I'm like, oh, cool. Okay. But like, why do you have this palm? They're like, yeah, this is, I don't know, this has been our logo. So it was literally because I was like, why do they have the Lebanese flag as their logo? And another accident, they were like, oh yeah, we offer foundation courses pre-university. And at that time, so I was studying British system, which has 13 years, but I kind of was tired of being in school and you have the option of leaving after 12. So I was like, okay, I'll leave after 12 years, go and do this foundation at SOAS, and then from there apply and go to LSE. But then, yeah, it was a coincidence. I ended up going to SOAS. I really liked it and I stayed. And then I ended up doing my bachelor's and master's both at that university.
And your dissertation was also something related to Gulf studies. What was it about?
So my bachelor's dissertation was about governance in Dubai post financial crisis of 2008. And then my master's dissertation was on UAE foreign policy. The thing was, and the reason I chose to write these things was because research on the Gulf was virtually non-existent. So like, for example, when I was doing my research on UAE foreign policy, there were like 2 or 3 books on UAE foreign policy at the time, and then like a handful of published articles. But the point is that like academic research on these states was very limited. I had needed to do so much field work and develop primary sources that made me really interested in Gulf studies. I remember during my undergrad, I took a course, a few courses, but then there was one on like, introduction to Middle East politics. And the Gulf states, as part of like what Middle East politics was, I remember was 2 weeks in which we talked about oil. And I was like, what the hell? The Gulf is not just oil and security. There's a lot here. And that's when I kind of began to realize that like this part of the world that I was from was so heavily under theorized.
And what is it about the UAE foreign policy? Because now it's getting very interesting, because I look at it from an expat's point of view, first of all. And secondly, I'm looking at it as an entrepreneur who helps to relocate businesses and talents to the UAE. So let's say my field of work and your research topic are very similar. However, like mine is, let's say, much more practical. Now I want to know, let's say, your point of view. What is the UAE foreign policy, and do you think it's effective at all, or what were your findings?
Definitely very effective. And that was one of the reasons I decided to want to look into it. This was at the time of the Arab Spring, around 2011, when all of a sudden this region, as in the Middle East region, was thrown into uncertainty by popular street movements, protests against the many dictatorial and autocratic and authoritarian regimes in the region, starting in Tunis and then Egypt. And so the point being here is, though at the time, that fever or that sense had made its way to the Gulf. And there were certain examples in the Gulf of this movement towards democratic participation, or whatever you want to call it. But what was interesting was that these 6 Arab Gulf states, for the most part, found themselves immune to these movements. Again, to varying extents, et cetera, et cetera. But it was because of that researchers and the rest of the world, even great powers, were like, oh shit, we didn't realize that these nations had the level of autonomy or assertiveness that they did. Because what ended up happening was, because the Gulf states at that time found themselves to be more stable than the rest of the nations in the region, they suddenly filled these power vacuums that were created by the fact that Egypt was no longer kind of functioning in the same way it did, or the typical powers in the region, Syria, you name it. So on an international level, these states, which in terms of their foreign policy were previously very much viewed as, oh, they're just going to do whatever the United States tells them to do, or whatever is in the best interest of the United States, and that's what defines their foreign policy. During the Arab Spring, these states were being proactive in, for example, supporting certain movements around the region that they thought made sense, or they thought were the best way forward, you name it, but making decisions that weren't necessarily tied to what the United States would have thought was a good idea, basically having this assertiveness. And it was that assertiveness at that time that was very interesting to see and then study, seeing that the UAE at literally that point and the rest of the region was essentially rediscovering themselves. This also came at a time when the UAE and Saudi in particular, his leadership was younger. So you had the two Muhammads, Muhammad bin Zayed and Muhammad bin Salman, and that new, I don't want to say, slightly more youthful, proactive, confident approach to their nations and the region. And so, it was all of these things coupled together that have turned the Arab Gulf states of the 21st century into much more dynamic states with a greater influence in the region, as well as on an international scale. So again, on your practical perspective, you see that it's a cause for more interest in, FDI or even migration, you name it.
That's very interesting. I agree. Do you think there was anything else except for the young leaders that made this change possible?
Definitely the young leaders, the young population. That was another one. This interest in diversifying their economies away from oil. So essentially, you're creating a new economic boom as these nations are diversifying. You have generations of investment in their knowledge economy, primarily through their population. So like people like myself who have, went off and studied all around the world and have come back with world-class skills. And then, it's basically, we go back to their policies of We favor strategic stability. We favor security. We favor being an interesting place to come and do business, basically. Like that's how these states kind of see themselves and see their future in securing the ability for them to be these great economic hubs.
So the economic ambitions are, let's say, thing number one. But how do you think it affects the cultural side of things? What I mean is that like 90% of population of the UAE are basically expats from all over the globe, and there are different communities within the country, and every community, depending on the size of it, is bringing something into the country because they bring kind of their traditions, their holidays, their way of doing business. How does it affect you Emirati guys? Because, like also we don't really talk enough about this openly, I think, and I'm very curious.
To be fair, I don't know to what extent I personally count. I'm a little bit more, I guess, westernized, etc. Also, yeah, key. Like I have a great example of how practically life has changed. Our weekends are now Saturday and Sunday. It used to be Thursday, Friday. Then they changed it to Friday, Saturday, and most recently Saturday, Sunday, because they want, the UAE's economy to be in line with the rest of the world, the financial markets. They were always like losing a day. That's just, the clearest example. But so it goes from there to you name it. Like the impact has of people's lives here. The reality of the situation is we don't know what the impact is going to be, at least for another generation. So I guess my generation and the Gen Zs lived in this transition period, but it's only with the, like, I guess, generation alpha and stuff that you're going to see a generation born of this change, hence to really understand the impact it has had. So with my generation, one of the key things, of the many things people were complaining about, for example, was, oh, you guys are losing your attachment to the Arabic language and to your culture for the most part. The Arabic language one, very true. I personally struggle with my Arabic, which is super unfortunate. And then, yeah, this attachment to culture thing, like suddenly we're exposed to everything from like, I don't know, Western liberal norms to Japanese culture to, so the essence of like what Emirati culture was, I remember around 2010, there was this big movement of people discussing, okay, what about our identity? What is Emirati identity? How is it gonna continue to exist in this place where, one, we're a minority in our population, as an extreme minority, less than 10%. And then with all of these constant other influences and changes, like there was a question of like, how do we preserve Emirati identity, which I think was an interesting reaction, which is basically seeing Emirati identity as the cliche heritage and culture of like, I don't know, food or the way you talk. The more interesting question is, how is this identity gonna change, or what elements of it are going to react to these different conditions? Because like culture and identity, it's not just a folklore or heritage, it's much more complex and evolving. So to equate Emirati identity with this, like, the cliche camels or falcons and food, these like culture with a big C, I think isn't the best way to look at it, because then you'll basically see an Emirati as like I don't know, like a Native American or something, where you have this very stereotypical view of what makes an Emirati, which is just one element of these cultures. Same way with anything else, it doesn't boil down to hot dogs and baseball.
And what is a good approach to kind of identify this, let's say, Emirati culture, but make it more, I don't know, flexible or fluid? Is there a way, in your opinion?
Super tough question to answer. There's been serious studies. They've commissioned consultants, and there's been a lot of movement and talk and discussion about this. I don't know if I have a clear opinion on this that isn't kind of shallow or simplistic.
Yeah, well, I am thinking myself, and I also have no idea how to, what would be the right approach for that. And you personally, how do you identify yourself? Do you have any, let's say, strong cultural identity?
Yeah, it's weird. That's actually something I haven't thought about properly in a while. Sure, yeah, I identify with the fact that I'm Emirati. I also identify with my Lebanese side, maybe not in terms of culture or heritage, but just love for that familial side. So I identify with Lebanon as a place and stuff purely because I have family there. But let's look at, my value structure. Let's be honest here, maybe quite influenced by my upbringing in the States. So maybe this liberal leaning towards Western values. But I'll be honest, I haven't thought about it that much, so I don't know.
And when you say Western values, do you have anything specific in mind? We one of our previous in one of our previous interviews, our guest, his name is Imad. He is Lebanese, but he grew up in Saudi, and then he spent many years in Canada and US, and then he moved to the UAE. And he said that he was kind of moving to the UAE because he was missing terribly this kind of Arabness that he didn't get there. So, and for you, I have this a little bit opposite question, what are the values, the so-called Western, even though I don't like this label, but we're using it. Fine, let's continue using it then. What are the values that really are appealing to you and you think you kind of got after years of living in different countries?
The Ahmad thing, I actually totally understand, because honestly now every time you go back to, I don't know, the States or the UK, or I'll be honest, yeah, I'm I don't really see myself in this place because I don't feel like society here is something that I truly see eye to eye with. And yeah, I think, again, these are things I haven't really thought about, but yeah, being here, I have a sense that I like the way people exist. I like the way they think. So back to the question, key things I appreciate about Western values is openness to criticality. I think that idea of emphasis on freedom of expression, I really like that. I think that's something that we could do with a little bit more here in this part of the world, essentially in constructive criticism. So not in just this abstract notion of just always being able to be critical, but in the usefulness of being constructively critical. But I think that's it. Arab or whatever you want to call the values from here of familial structures. I don't know. It feels like there's a greater emphasis on care in this part of the world.
Care as in families or at work or social care?
In terms of how human beings interact with each other. Because obviously, in the West, it's, at least in this moment in time, it's very individualistic, entrepreneurial, capitalism, everyone for themselves, competition. Unfortunately, what that's done is it's created, even in, the most basic social interactions, this kind of transactionalism, which is what is this interaction going to do for me, economically? Everything is tied to the fact that we are economic actors, I feel. So especially in the West, you see it with the fact that, I don't know, there's so many homeless people or whatever. Why? When you interact with people in the global South, I think it's not just Arabs and again, this is what's interesting is what is the definition of the global South? Because you also see it, in my opinion, in some not small ways, but you see it, I think, in Russian culture, in cultures of Eastern Europe, etc. Of this, in some way, care.
I'll stop torturing you on this identity thing for now. Maybe I'll have some more questions later. Yeah. Okay. But I know these are like tough questions and a lot to think about. But what I also want to learn a lot is these two projects that you're doing now. Can you please, like, one was related to art collecting, right? And that's very interesting because, well, many of our clients are actually art galleries, and I have a lot of close friends that are into art, and I've heard that, well, the art scene in the UAE and Dubai specifically is not, well, not an easy place to be, and that people do not really have the good, let's say, art collecting culture, if we can call it like this. They don't understand like what to invest in. They just buy something like sparkling, something fancy, something mainstream, and are happy with it and are not kind of looking into the depths of art. Have you noticed such a thing? And yeah, please also tell me if you how does your platform work?
Maybe a little bit lucky in the position I'm in is that I don't interact on a personal level too much with collectors who are, that more commercial side. But I do agree that it's seen as a hallmark of the art ecosystem here, or at least one of the things people talk about. Engage 101 is the first of the two projects that I currently work on. We call it an art collecting and research platform. Essentially, what the platform was born out of was a recognition of the fact that in the arts ecosystem in the UAE today, you have a plethora of practicing artists. However, a severe, essentially not shortage, but imbalance in the gallery infrastructure when it comes to the amount of artists existing versus the amount of artists who are represented by galleries. So this is because, like, since 2007 or whatever it is, you've had this massive top-down interest in investing in visual art as part of the culture of the UAE. And then now in Saudi, with its movements towards visual arts as well, et cetera, et cetera. What happens is government top-down decides, okay, we need to promote visual arts. What are we doing? We're building these mega museums, et cetera, the Louvre, Guggenheim, you name it. But then also we're investing and pushing towards increasing every aspect of this. So we want to produce and create more visual artists. So we're creating, bachelors of fine arts programs, masters of fine arts, etc. in terms of like our educational infrastructure. We're changing school curriculums. We're creating opportunities and infrastructure, and billions of dollars being pushed in, and creating this, influencing the way the art ecosystem exists. So like the way the art ecosystem is today is very different to how it was 20 years ago. Not to say that it didn't exist, but in the way it exists today is purely, I think, best understood as this like government-led effort and what it has meant. To go back to the point of this massive infrastructural investment in the past 15 years, you've created a generation of artists who have studied and developed their skills and talents. Now, the gallery infrastructure hasn't been able to accommodate to this massive influx of new artists. So Engage 101, going back to that, was a small COVID time response to, man, there are so many great artists practicing in the UAE, but because they're not gallery represented, they don't have a fantastic opportunity to be able to reach the market. So yeah, it was a small scale effort to bring some of these fantastic non-gallery represented artists to the market. And so yeah, we organized sales and various other activities that try to nurture and promote said artists. It's amazing to see that a few of the artists that we've worked with through Engage 101 have now become gallery represented and are moving up in their career. Essentially, there was this thing we used to talk about at the time, and it still exists. It's like the gap between an artist when they first start their career and when they're, ready to join a gallery. There are various steps in the way. You have to develop yourself. You're not going to be ready to, be commercially viable from day one. Sure, maybe there's an example here or there, but like with any other career, you need to develop, you need to grow. And to do that, it takes certain types of infrastructure. As I mentioned, residencies and being part of like non-commercial exhibitions, you name it. Because of the way the ecosystem exists here, that is still developing as we speak. So it was a recognition of that growing infrastructure and the gaps that still exist that motivated the creation of Engage 101. The other key part is the research. And again, it goes back to the fact that in the Gulf, a lot of the research that is produced about it comes from a Western perspective, comes from literally individuals, whether they're journalists or researchers or you name it, come into the Gulf for, small time, form opinions, and then go back and create these simplistic perceptions of the region. And the best way to counteract that is to produce perspectives from the region, which have a little bit more nuance and depth and I think rootedness. So yeah, that was a little bit of the answer. And then going back to the point you made about the fact that the art ecosystem here is seen as driven by these highly commercial attitudes and interest in shiny things. I guess, yeah, unfortunately, that is a fact. But the other reality is when it comes to like, again, I don't know what the best terms here would be, because it's all subjective at the end of the day when it comes to art. But like good art, for lack of a better way to like put it, there's a lot of that being produced in the region by Emiratis, by locals, by UAE-based artists who are from here, but maybe not Emirati by nationality, by Arab artists, by South Asian artists, by artists from other places around the world who have decided to move here because they feel like this is a great place to be and work and think at this time in history. And because of all of this, there's a lot of fantastic movement when it comes to visual arts and cultural production in general in the UAE right now. So although, yeah, sure, there's a lot of junk art that's being sold in some places in Dubai. If you go to, I don't know, Sarkal instead, most of the stuff that you'll see in galleries there is, world class, very interesting, speaking to, the topics that really hit home when it comes to the reason of why art should exist, questioning our purposes, questioning our systems and approaches to society and life and development and the future and the past. And you're seeing a lot of fantastic art being produced here that's super engaging and really holds up to an international standard.
I think there is a widespread opinion that art collecting is only, let's say, for rich people. So how big is the demand, in fact, for young artists, and are they affordable?
Yeah, there is a big push in the UAE at this moment to try and counteract that narrative and to try and promote, I think, young, early career collectors. So on various fronts, from small scale to actually like the government, or at least, big institutional level of trying to foster collecting practices, potentially future patrons, you name it. But that view of the fact that the only way artistic practices will truly flourish and thrive are through these social connections that will drive it forward. So this idea that art is something that is collected by rich people very much kind of doesn't fit in with this with the true way I think collecting happens, which is in no way something that you have to do, or something that you can only do if you're rich. Some of the best collectors or collections in the world were created by people who were not necessarily, affluent or wealthy. True collecting is more of a social activity. You're telling a story, whether it's a political story or a cultural story or you name it. And then most of that stuff tends to happen not by accident, but through social interaction. So again, going back to these, what were the best collections is, yeah, it's not necessarily a billionaire with an art advisor. And to go back to collecting being accessible, yeah, you can buy, I don't want to put, unless, you think that's a good idea, but like, it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to numbers, but to simplify it, yeah, sure, you can buy great art for, I don't know, $100 or whatever it is. And that has great potential to exponentially increase in its value if, you're looking at an early career artist and then they, in 10 years do become successful, etc.
How do you identify good art?
I don't know if I do. Again, for me, it's not a coincidence, but it's just the fact of the kind of the way I've existed, with the fact that I interact with a lot of artists and early career artists. And it's, for me personally, it was just, I meet someone who I think is interesting. Same way you would meet a new friend and you're like, okay, you're cool. Let's hang out. That is literally what it is. Like, for me, these artists are like, these are just friends and acquaintances and people who I know and discuss with. So it's just that. It's these people around me I discuss with. I'm like, okay, you're especially cool. What you're working on both looks awesome and is talking about a very interesting topic. I would love to have one of these works. And it's not about me thinking, oh, this is going to be valuable in the future or whatever. It's just that this is awesome. I would love to have a piece of this or whatever that may be. That's honestly all it is in my case. It's not strategic.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I ask this kind of thing. I just see a little bit of a snobbish approach in the art ecosystem when, for example, like the artists are accusing each other of, okay, you are too commercial. No, you are too commercial. You are too designish. No, it's you. And then the art curators are doing the same. And this kind of, those dialogues, they create the vibe as if there is that perfect formula for, okay, this is a good art. I think about it a lot and I don't have an answer myself.
Me neither. Because, yeah, we do use the word commercial as a criticism of art when this work is too commercial. I think the reality is we need to find better ways to describe what we're talking about. So maybe, what do you mean by this work being too commercial? Do you mean that it's pandering? Do you mean that it's unoriginal, etc.?
Or do you just mean that people want to buy it and you're just jealous because no one wants to buy your work or something?
Hell yeah, that too, right? Again, this is something I've discovered, is that because visual arts is, artists are people, ego really plays a big part in how all of this exists. So yeah, unfortunately as well, it can find itself being a little bit of an unhealthy social space between artists themselves, between artists and the institutions and the curators. And yeah, there's a little bit of, it can be a little bit unhealthy. Yes.
What do you have in your art collection?
Okay, I'll tell you the story of the first artwork that I bought. That after buying it, I was like, I am now an art collector. It was literally for a long time. I thought I considered myself a collector with one artwork in my collection. And so that artwork was by Sheikh Al-Mazroor, who is today, I think, one of the most recognized, interesting kind of Emirati artists. She's represented by Lori Shabibi in Dubai and is very much the definition of a mid-career artist who's quite successful. I purchased a piece. I was lucky to be able to purchase a piece by Sheikh Al Mazroor shortly after she graduated from her undergraduate BFA, purely because we were friends. She was studying with my brother Khalid, who's a co-founder of Bayt Al Mamzar, at the College of Fine Arts in Sharjah. And so I've known her since, I was young, and I've seen her practice develop throughout her university years. And yeah, so I remember going to this art show, which was in, again, the early years of the contemporary art ecosystem moment in the UAE. And it was a show of quote unquote Emirati art. So I go to this show and yay, great, Emirati art, clap, clap, cute, good stuff, but whatever, nothing that like blew your mind. Then I remember turning to a wall and seeing this piece and being like, whoa, what is this? This is art. And I was like, wow, like mesmerized by this artwork. And when I was like, okay, damn, like, I was having a moment. And then so I go up to the curator and I'm like, dude, whose work is this? This is legit. Like, wow. She's like, yeah, this is a work by Sheikh Al Mazroor. And when she said that, I had like a flashback moment of seeing Sheikha's practice all throughout those university years and knowing, her work and what she does, and kind of seeing that artwork emerging from that. So like to see all of those strings connect and result in this piece. And I was like, oh shit, wow. And to be fair, it's just the sculpture. Point is, after that show, I go to Sheikha and I'm like, dude, and this is at that time, by the way, someone who like had no idea about the art market, or I was an outsider. I was still a social science student. Like I didn't have any of the experience I do now back then. So I was like, dude, this work is great. I don't know, but I'd like to buy it. So she's like, yeah, actually, this piece is sold, but you can commission me to produce like a similar work or whatever. And I'm like, well, what's a commission, etc. I didn't know any of this. I was like, yeah, okay, like if you can make that same work. And then she told me how much it was. I had just published something, I think it was, and like I had a bit of money. And again, this is like, early 20s, dude. So like I didn't have responsibilities or anything. And I was like, okay, yeah, this makes sense. I need to buy this. And the amount we're talking about, by the way, is like it was a very modest amount, even that. So yeah, I commissioned Sheikha to produce another version of that artwork, and that was the first piece and only piece in my collection at the time.
Is it also a story about how you started to do the things around art?
Yeah. So literally, it was that day that started kind of my interest in the arts. It was the same day at that same exhibition. I remember I had seen something I found also particularly terrible. And I was like, this stuff shouldn't be, like, we need to have better critical dialogue about what good and bad is. Like, this is really bad. This shouldn't have been on display. So I remember I wrote this article about the importance of criticism in the ecosystem, because again, something about like the Marathi culture is publicly to criticize something is a taboo. It's seen as impolite. But yeah, that's just one thing. So I was basically like talking about how we need to get over our sensitivity towards being publicly critical about things, because that's the only way you'll be able to like truly develop artistic practices, is when there's healthy dialogue about, what's good, what isn't, why, subjective opinions, all of that. So yeah, it was literally that day that I became a collector and I started to have like critical opinions.
Yeah, what's the right way to criticize as per Emirati culture, by the way, if like the criticizing publicly is a taboo?
I don't know if I'd be the best person to ask about this, just because I don't have like the most kind of intimate relationship with the nuances of Emirati culture. But yeah, it's something basically about the fact that to publicize something or to speak in public holds weight. And it goes back to a culture of chivalry, maybe again. So basically, like, if you are to speak in public, you should speak good things. And if you have something not good to say, you should try and do that as much as possible in a way that, because it's all tied to like prestige and respect for the other, and to not want to bring them down, etc. So like, if you want to criticize someone, you should try and do that in a way that doesn't tarnish their public perception.
So I have maybe a couple of last questions. So one of them is, like, we still didn't talk about Bayt Al Mamzar. How is it related to the Engage 101 platform, if it is?
Yeah, it is not in a practical sense whatsoever. They are two completely separate projects. I think the only thing they share is this interest in supporting and responding to the needs of the art ecosystem. So especially with Bayt Al Mamzar, its creation was a response to the fact that artists and the art community felt the need for community, the need for spaces to exist as artists, which we can come together and discuss, debate, experiment, explore. These spaces were missing. We were lucky enough that my dad indulged the idea my brother had for our grandma's house, which was, hey, listen, instead of selling it or renting it, how about we try and turn it into a cultural space? I say this now of like, okay, you look at 2.5 years later and you see, what Bayt Al Mamzar is, and you're like, yeah, this is a cool idea. Sure. Of course he said yes, but like at the time, saying yes to an idea is very different.
And this is kind of a non-commercial project for you, is it?
Yeah, yes and no. Because Dubai doesn't have many examples of spaces like Bayt Al Mamzar, from a licensing perspective, getting that off the ground was and continues to be one of our biggest challenges in terms of the like legislative ability for us to operate. With that said, I think it would make most sense if we were registered as a non-for-profit, but because of the difficulty of getting a non-for-profit license, we currently have a commercial license. And yeah, but I think we would qualify more as a non-profit than we would as a commercial, but a commercial project. Yeah, there's that uncertainty from a legislative perspective, but also from kind of, this has been an organic project from day one. We are very okay with it growing, responding to kind of how the community and communities are engaging and interacting with it.
I usually always have a final question, which I ask everyone. I know, taking into consideration your, let's say, identity uncertainty, it might be a bit tough, but I'll still ask you. So if you were to name, let's say, one character trait of an Emirati person that you absolutely adore and want everyone on earth have, what would it be?
I don't know if I'd want everyone to have it, but there's a term in Emirati, it's called stener, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but essentially it equates to something like, take away the gendered nature of it, but like chivalry. So it's not like a masculine thing, but it's virtue. It's to act with virtue towards others. So to be very, in whatever circumstance you're in, whether it's the need to be generous or the need to be helpful, it'll vary in whatever circumstance you're in. Again, like chivalry, but it's not gendered. And that's something that, again, I don't know if I want all people to have it, but it's so, it's kind of beautiful.
And a quick reminder, this season is sponsored by FlowerWow, a marketplace where you can find the right gift for your loved ones. Download the app through the link in the description. Use the promo code CULTURE, it's CULTURE, to get a 15% discount on anything you want. This discount works until December 2024. By supporting our sponsors, you support us. Thank you so much. We will hear each other quite soon.